Iowa City is a unique community. This uniqueness is shaped by the people who contribute their ideas and their time and their energy to the life of Iowa City and the university. Welcome to a series of biographical interviews of special women and men who have affected this community. Their contributions have been valuable, their lives creative and full. What brought them here? Who influenced them? What contributions are they the most pleased about? These and other questions will be explored during this series of interviews entitled, Tell Me Your Story. Dr. Frederick Blody, University of Iowa Professor Emeritus, is an international authority in ophthalmology. He came to Iowa City in 1952 in the Department of Ophthalmology and served as chair from 1967 until he stepped down in 1984. Dr. Blody continues to treat patients, conduct research, teach medical students, and is a guest lecturer in many parts of the world. He was the first foreign-trained eye doctor to serve as president in the American Academy of Ophthalmology. Dr. Blody has been voted an honorary member of various ophthalmic societies throughout the world. He has published books, articles, translations, and has held various editorial assignments, most notably the chief editor of Archives of Ophthalmology, and that was from '76 until '84. Honors have been many during his long and distinguished career. A professorship is named in the Department of Ophthalmology, to be announced in the next week. The Distinguished Friend of the University of Iowa, awarded in 1988. A member of the German Academy of Science, the only American ophthalmologist with that distinction, and an honorary medical degree from the University of Leipzig, and the Merit Cross for Science and Arts from the Federal Republic of Austria. Dr. Blody and his wife Ati have raised 2 children in Iowa City, Christopher and Barbara. Welcome, Dr. Blody, to Tell Me Your Story.
Thank you.
You were born in 1917 in Vienna,
Correct.
Austria.
That's correct.
And tell me a little bit about your first family.
Well, I don't remember Vienna because when I was about 2 or 3 years old, we moved, my parents and my brother and I, to some outside of the suburbs, small village where I grew up and spent all my youth.
Mm-hmm. I read that at one time, before you got into medicine, that you wanted to enroll in the School of Diplomacy. There's a story in that. What happened?
That's correct. I was always interested in languages, and so was my father, who was a lawyer. And I thought it would be fun to enroll into this College of Diplomacy. In Central Europe, the educational system is different. That means if you have passed the correct examinations and are an Austrian citizen, you can enter any of these higher educational facilities. So when I discussed this with my father, this was in the late 30s, astutely commented that there would probably be no need for Austrian diplomats in the near future, and advised me to study something that is of more international character. So I followed the example of some of my friends and entered medicine.
Where were you in medical school when the Second World War broke out?
I was just beginning the last year. The last year of my medical education started in the fall of '39, and you know the war broke out September 1, '39.
Mm-hmm. You lost your student deferment. What happened?
Well, every student lost the deferment late in August of '39 when the mobilization started, and I was drafted into the anti-tank artillery.
Mm-hmm. But then you didn't stay in that. What happened?
No, fortunately not, because this is a unit that has a high mortality rate in war. Unfortunately, being a senior medical student, I was transferred to the medical corps. And then they let me finish my medical education so that I graduated in 1940.
Mm-hmm. There's a story, though, about you were imprisoned.
Well,
what happened?
That was later in my career. During the war, there was a ring of physicians in Vienna who helped young recruits so that they wouldn't have to return to the front. That was at a time when the war was already lost. I was only at the periphery of this, but I did help one young man like this, and when the whole thing blew up, I, of course, was also court-martialed and sentenced to 8 years of imprisonment.
So you found some anesthetics to give to these young
No, yeah, that's exactly what I did. I prescribed to them ether so they could administer narcosis, anesthesia, general anesthesia to themselves. And while they did it, they would break each other's bones. Now, I was not participating in this. I just provided the ether, but they could trace it, of course, because they had my signature on the prescription.
Where was the prison camp that you were sent?
Well, it varied a great deal. The first one was up the Danube, but then the Russians came up the Danube, so we were moved then to Lower Bavaria. And the Americans came from the other side. It was kind of a crazy situation. Well, we were finally taken over by the American troops in Upper Austria.
That's who liberated the camp?
Right.
I see. Well, you got to the United States, and there's another wonderful story. You told me before the interview that you met your wife, Ati. You knew her since kindergarten.
Correct. We went to the same kindergarten.
So I can't ask you how you met your wife, because you probably don't remember
No.
the exact moment. But how did that romance bring you over to the United States?
Well, my wife, though she is also born in Vienna, did have for a time a Czech passport. You see, in Europe you get the citizenship from your parents and not from the place you're born. And that made it difficult at that time to get work permit in Vienna. So she got disgusted, and rightly so, and left for America, where her mother had been since after World War I, because she married a German-American citizen. And she came back, this was in 37, she came back in 39, and we spent the summer together, and then, of course, everything came to a standstill when I was drafted and had to leave Vienna, and she visited me sometimes, and I astutely pointed out to you with my usual intellectual gift for forecasting that the war will only last about 6 months, and I said, you are in an unpleasant situation here. Why don't you go back to your mother, and we'll be back in. And we got engaged and did this under the assumption that the war would last a few months and be over. Well, of course, we were separated for 6 years.
When did you get to the United States? I mean, you were married and
Well,
then...
we were married in Vienna. We were among the first couple that got permission from General Clark, because before that there was a strict fraternization ban between Austrian Germans on one side and the Americans on the other. But then that was relaxed, and because we could prove that we had been engaged before the war, we got a permission to marry. So we married in Vienna in 46.
So you were a war, not a bride, a war spouse.
Right. And then I had a chance to come to the United States 1 year later, supported by a grant from the World Health Organization.
And you came to, I read, Columbia University.
Right, right.
And what was your, were you doing research?
I was a research fellow that first year or two, and then could also work in the clinic. I worked with one very prominent American ophthalmologist.
And who is that?
That's Algernon Rees, who is dead now, of course, but he was extremely kind to me and acted like a father.
Why did you choose ophthalmology?
Well, I chose it during the last year of my medical school, and perhaps even later. First, I thought in going to general surgery. I started with getting training in pathology for a while at the City Hospital of Vienna. Enjoyed that very much, but I knew that I didn't want to be a pathologist. So then I turned for a short while to general surgery, but they let us then choose some surgical specialties. The training and education was controlled during the war by the military and the government. But they did let some people train in ophthalmology. So I took that opportunity and went to the clinic, became a resident.
So you were at Columbia doing research,
Right.
and then your next move was to Iowa City, Lucky University of Iowa. How did you find out about Iowa? And
Well, that was only because of Dr. Alson Braley, whom you interviewed a few months ago. Dr. Braley at that time was also a staff member at the Presbyterian Hospital of New York, which is part of Columbia University. And we happened to have a locker next to each other because they were alphabetically arranged. And Dr. Braley introduced himself with his usual enthusiasm and optimism, and we got to know each other, and I was really impressed by him. I responded to his charisma, and I never had met anybody like that before. Coming from war-torn Central Europe to America and meet a man like this who is obviously honest, enthusiastic, kind, I thought that would be a pleasure to work for him. And when he became chairman here, he invited me to join him, which I did.
Your main area is ocular pathology. For a layperson like me, why is that so important in the treatment of eye?
It helps the clinician to come to a diagnosis, just like the general pathologist helps the internist or surgeon to come to a diagnosis, examining biopsies or dead tissue, determining what's wrong with the patient. And that is of great value of the education and further development of a physician and an ophthalmologist.
Dr. Bellotti, over the years, what have been some, do you choose to say, that are the most major significant changes in eye treatment?
Well, one is, for instance, the cataract operation and the rehabilitation of a patient after a cataract operation. The fact that we can now implant artificial plastic lenses into the eye with which the patient can see was unforeseen, is miraculous 20 years ago. A second approach that has changed tremendously is the detachment of the retina, or retinal diseases in general, for instance due to diabetes, which can now be treated not only by a surgical procedure but also by laser beams and so on. These are tremendous advances in the treatment of eye diseases.
When you became chair after Dr. Braley stepped down, when you became the department chair of ophthalmology, was it hard to sell the University of Iowa and Iowa City in the Midwest to hopefully professors and you needed to have come here and residents to train here?
Not really. The department had an excellent reputation that started already with C.S. O'Brien and was continued so splendidly by Alson Braley. So the reputation was very good, and I did not have any difficulty recruiting people both from the east and west coast of this country but also from Europe.
Tell us about this wonderful evening at Hancher Auditorium when you were honored. I think it was back in 1984.
Right.
Two very special things happened.
Well, it was a very festive occasion that was on the occasion of my retirement as chairman. One thing was that the Austrian Consul General from Chicago was here and presented me with the award that you mentioned before. The second one was that it was announced that a professorship in my honor would be established at the University of Iowa, and that some recipient would be selected once a certain amount of money was available.
And that's the one that's going to be announced very soon.
Correct.
And where will that be? At a special meeting?
That will be a special meeting be held at the Union.
When you stepped down in 1984 as chair, something really quite remarkable developed. You went over to Saudi Arabia and became very involved in eye. I'd like to have you tell my viewers about this association in Saudi Arabia.
Well,
you were not a part of Desert Storm, I realize.
No, that's long before. Like many things in our lives, I think they are coincidental happenstances. And I had a very good friend who was chairman of the Department of Ophthalmology at Baylor in Houston. And he's younger than I am, and he also resigned from the chairmanship there because he just wanted to do something different. He's a very energetic, adventurous, gifted man. And he became the first medical director of the King Khalid Eye Specialist Hospital in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. And he remained there as director for 2 years. And one of his main obligations was to recruit ophthalmologists from the United States and from Europe to the staff of this hospital. So one day we had a meeting in Chicago. A friend of mine who is actually Syrian but worked in Saudi Arabia called me from Chicago and said, I have a very important letter and message which I'd like to hand deliver to you. And I knew this man from Boston, and he came and gave it to me and says, this is an official invitation to join the staff at King Khalid Eye Hospital, written from this Dr. Payton. And when I read that letter, it was several pages. He outlined my obligation that I would have to initiate a residency training program at that hospital, and pointed out some of the benefits and advantages of such a position. I thought when I read it first, this is just ideal for me. That's just what I would like to do. You would like to leave the university, let the new chairman alone for a while. He'll be better off without the old man. And for me, it would be a tremendous challenge. But I thought, if I tell this to my wife, she'll think I need an angiogram of my brain, that something screw got loose. Well, fortunately, exactly the opposite occurred. When I told Adi that and showed her the letter and everything, she said, let's do it, let's go. So we did.
Okay, and how long did you spend there?
Well, off and on several years. The first contract was for a year, then I came back for a while, the next one was for nearly a year, and then I came back for shorter contracts.
And are you still in that?
Yeah, they still want me to come this fall again, for instance. I'm just negotiating with them, yeah.
So how long will this time be?
Oh, this will only be for about 4 weeks. Now I'm only participating in what they call a basic science course, which is an instruction course for new residents and other physicians.
So you went, the first time you went, you lived in a compound? Or
Correct, we live in a compound.
For 1 whole year you
Correct,
were there?
Yeah.
What kind of medical system does Saudi Arabia have?
Well, this hospital is patterned after an American system. It's just like an American hospital. It gets the same accreditation from the Joint Commission. It's like an American hospital. It's run by an American company on contract.
Is medical care paid for by the Saudi Arabia government or what?
Yes, in general, yes. That means nearly everybody has some kind of agency that covers for the expenses, either the military or Department of Education and so on. Now, occasionally when a patient comes without any means, of course the patient will be treated free.
What was, you sound like you probably didn't have as much of adjustment perhaps because it was run by Americans on contract, this hospital.
Correct.
But Ati must have had some adjustments.
Well, of course there are adjustments, but she took it very well and she enjoyed it. She wasn't there all the time. She would come for a few months and then go, let's say, to Europe for a while, to our relatives, or back to the States, come again for a few months. No, we enjoyed it tremendously. It's an experience, it's an adventure. You have a great chance to travel. You get, the fringe benefits are excellent. I mean, they treat you royally, there's no question about it. And you can travel to Africa or India or whatnot with very short hops. You have 2 months of vacation. I mean, they're very liberal with their fringe benefits.
Did you have much of a, do most residents speak English?
Oh yeah, everything was in English.
Everything was in
English. The
English.
whole hospital is run in English. Every hospital record is English. And of course the education, the medical school is in English. It's sometimes even embarrassing because you see an old Arab patient coming to you and ask you a question. I couldn't even answer him. It's his hospital and his country, and I couldn't even help him. I felt sometimes embarrassed.
Was there a translator on duty or on the
Well, there are
staff?
always translators around. Oh yeah, every physician who works there on a patient has translator with him or her.
Tell me a little bit about Riyadh, since you've spent so much time there.
Riyadh is a large city, has more than 1 million inhabitants. It's practically a new city. Very little is left of the old city. It used to be the capital of Saudi Arabia for a short time, but all the old, most of the old buildings have disappeared. The new buildings are ultra-modern. The whole city is ultra-modern. I mean, you have 6-lane highways through the city and beautiful modern buildings. All the comfort, shops, that you can imagine.
Did the hospital have to stop like in many districts during Desert Storm, did you have to stop for the prayer day 5 times a day? Did the hospital stop?
Not the hospital.
Not the
now, they call 5 times for prayer. Now, the two at the sunset and sunrise are not during working hours. Now, the others can happen during working hours, but the rule was that hospital activities will not stop. Now, most other activities stop.
Tell me, looking back over your varied career, what contribution are you the most pleased about? Can you pick out 1 or 2?
Well, I think education is my main objective, and was always. I tried to train and educate young physicians to become competent ophthalmologists. I think that was my main objective in life.
What person, Dr. Blode, or event, or maybe persons, had a major influence on you in your
Except
life?
my wife, you mean?
Yes, except your wife.
Well, there were certainly 2 persons in Vienna who exerted a great influence. One was my first professor. His name was Meller, M-E-L-L-E-R, and he was a very strong personality who clashed with the Nazi regime, and was a very unusual man. And the second one was one of his successors, Professor Böck, who became a very good friend of mine, who unfortunately is now dead too. Now in this country, as I mentioned before, Algernon Rees in New York and Alson Braley in Iowa City.
So had these marvelous teachers along the way.
Right.
So you passed it on to your students and residents, and also your children. You have 2 children,
Right.
Christopher and Barbara, both physicians and both ophthalmologists.
That's correct.
The gene code is...
It's like a Mendelian dominant hereditary disease.
and you have grandchildren?
Right, the 2 boys.
2 boys. I've heard tell from your friends and colleagues that you have a passion for reading, and I'm sure it's not just medicine. What are your reading interests? What do
Well,
you
I've
like?
always been interested in history, all kinds of aspects of history, and I enjoy, like every Viennese, music. I'm a music fan in many ways. I love good music.
So you mostly read history when you're not into
Yes,
medicine?
I think so. That's correct.
Do you have a
Mostly.
favorite period of history? that
No,
you
I
read?
can be interested in any kind of history. Usually it's American or European.
You've had a cabin in Estes Park for many years. Do you get
Right.
much time to
Well,
time
more
there?
and more, fortunately, since I'm emeritus. We usually spend 2 months in the summer there.
Will
And
you-
the children like it too.
How did you find it? How did you find this?
Well, we have been going to Estes Park for maybe 25, 30 years, but we used to rent a certain house which suited us very well. One summer, we made our decision to rent too late, and we couldn't get that house, so the agent gave us another house. We were very, very disappointed about the other house. So we decided, because everybody in our family liked it. We love to climb mountains and hike. We do that, from Austria in the Alps. So we said, why don't we buy one? And I must say, Adi again found this house, which was for sale by the owner, and we were very lucky to get it.
Besides reading and medicine, what are your other avocations?
Well, I mean, I have one of my hobbies is collecting stamps. I'm not sure you know about that.
Oh, I didn't know
but
that. No.
Yeah, and that has
What kind of
branched
stamps?
out. I'm a so-called topical collector. That means I collect only stamps concerned with the eye, vision, blindness, ophthalmology, and so on. And I have published books about that, and I have spoken about it repeatedly. I have a vast collection of such stamps. I'm still collecting all the time. And it really has become nearly a compulsion. I follow this with a passion.
And there are that many stamps in this
Oh,
area?
yeah, hundreds and hundreds. My collection is certainly more than 1,000.
And the word must be out worldwide that there's some
Well,
Iowa City person who's collecting stamps on this
and I
field.
have a number of dealers who know about my interest and look out for it, and I, of course, myself try to get when I need something.
Tell me, I know you're stepped down and you're not retired. I mean, look what you've done since 1984. Besides going to Saudi Arabia, you said for 4 weeks. What other plans or travel plans do you have up, or what are you going to do in the next year? Do you know?
Well, I have a number of trips within this country, and
Are those business or pleasure, or a little of
mostly
both?
business, actually. As you know, I told you that I'm leaving tomorrow for California, where we have a meeting of an ophthalmological society. I'm invited the second week in June to Cornell as a visiting professor. I'll be again in California in the fall. We have an academy meeting. And we plan to go to London for a while, Adi and I.
You spend a lot of time in airplanes.
Well, I do, yeah.
Well, Dr. Blody, it's been a real pleasure to speak with you, but I have one last question. I read someplace you know 5 languages. Is this correct?
That's correct, yeah.
What are they?
Well, I'm beginning English now, and I think I'm making progress. But German, Italian, French, and Spanish.
And were these all learned in Austria?
Right, yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being my
Thank you
guest.
very much, Ms. Buchanan.
I've been talking to Dr. Frederick Blody, retired chairman of the Department of Ophthalmology and professor emeritus at the University of Iowa. Dr. Blody is an international authority in this field. He has received innumerable honors and holds several honorary memberships in various ophthalmic societies throughout the world. With the help of Dr. Blody's leadership and vision, the Department of Ophthalmology at the University of Iowa acquired a world-class reputation, a reputation for excellence in training residents, excellence in research, and excellence in the treatment of patients. When asked to describe some of Dr. Blody's qualities, a colleague and friend remarked that he is intellectually oriented, has the capacity and the vision to get things done, and a passion for acquiring knowledge, whether it's medicine, history, languages, opera, classical music. A true Renaissance man. We in Iowa and at the university are fortunate that Dr. Blody chose Iowa City to be his home.